Hello, sons and daughters of the Schizoid God. How you guys doing? Hello! Hello! You guys doing well, I hope? I don't hope for you could be doing whatever you want to do. You do what you want. How you gonna be doing it? All right. So, welcome, Midnight Mass. No, welcome to tropical. No, topical tragedy Tuesdays. Generally, on this day, I talk about something that's just been on my mind. It might not necessarily have to do with schizoid stuff, but sometimes it does. Sometimes it's connected in some capacity or another, maybe. If you do have Zoid-related questions, you are always welcome to put them in the chat. If I happen to spot it, I'll answer whatever I can while I'm rambling about whatever it is I'm going to be rambling about today. So it just kind of varies from Tuesday to Tuesday. And remember, I will remember this time, for Wednesday I'm going to be uploading a question, or posting a question for the Schizoid Saturday, in which I read the submissions to the answer regarding that question. I'm not sure what it's going to be 100% yet, but it will be posted tomorrow on the Zoid Void Discord. If you have not checked it out, and you believe yourself a schizoid, or have been diagnosed, and you've done your due diligence to really parse out what that is and how it may apply to you, and you think it's the case, then please check out the Zoid Void, do the application, join it, and be consumed by its darkness. Okay. So, the topic of today is, well, I'm exaggerating when I put the title, but I said the Materialist Revolution and all of its consequences. Right, and there are many consequences. A lot of side effects, a lot of very negative side effects, in a variety of ways. So I kind of want to, do a cursory discussion on the matter. Nothing too heavy. I'm not going to be busting out all the sources. I'm not going to be grabbing the books off the bookshelf on the matter. Terrible themes to begin with. But themes, meta themes, and things of that nature, absolutely is my ballpark. So, is the music too loud? Is it too loud? Tap it. Everything should be all right. So, when I say the Materialist Revolution, although it's not really called that, I'm talking about what occurred in during it was Civil War, post-Civil War, and World War I. So we're talking late 1800s, early 1900s. And that very important thing that happened was something called spiritualism. Some people would spiritists, but spiritualism. And now, when people hear that, most of the time what they think of is, oh, you mean religion? No. Oh, so like pagan beliefs? No, those are cool. But no, we are talking about something very different. Now, some of you that are already into like spooky stuff probably know this. Some of you that are into American history are probably very aware of this. But there's a lot about this stuff that a lot of people do not know and did not know, even when it was happening. But okay, so just to make it simple, during the Civil War, a lot of Americans died. A lot of grieving wives, a lot of grieving mothers, fathers, and so on and so forth. Brothers, sisters. Mostly sisters, since it was generally men dying. And, there's so much death, dying occurring, that people were searching for answers, right? whether it was through the church or whatever faith they had, and so on and so forth. The church just wasn't cutting it for some people, right? Some of these ideas and concepts about, like, oh, well, I guess they're going to burn in hell because of this reason. Oh, I guess because that or this reason, they deserved it. Or it was the Civil War was God's plan, things like that. Was the kind of messages that they would probably receive as consolation for now their dead sons, brothers, husbands. So they sought elsewhere. Now, where did they seek? Well, there was these people, referred to as spiritualists. Right? They've been around for a bit then, but they started popping up a lot more, and people started giving them more attention. And the idea, basically, because I'm terrible with names, I should have written some notes, but the particular gentleman that came up with some of these ideas and brought them forward, the kind of stuff his source in a dream, right? His source, lived experience. And the idea was that the afterlife, or the world of the spirits, was essentially a secular thing. The idea was that that spirit world was accessible to anyone, regardless of status, gender, and so on. In death, we are all equal. But in this case, it was literal. Everyone became essentially equal upon their untimely demise. So, with that came a variety of things. Right? Along that same period, you still had kind of weird like situation where science was kind of trying to deal with, like, okay, so how do we deal with these kind of materialist views regarding evolution, regarding human life, our understanding now of biology. We're talking late 1800s, and how do we parse this out with religion, right? So you still had a lot of scientists that were very much religious. It was pretty common. But then you also had the scientists that kind of were adamant about separating themselves from what they thought was a barbaric form of being. We have to let go of the haunts of the past, all this sort of stuff, right? And that's when a lot of these materialist perspectives really started getting a little more attention, a lot more attention, right? But at the same time, you have these spiritualists. Right? Now, generally speaking, the materialist's perspective, the only enemy, or not even enemy, but the only people they had to kind of deal with and combat philosophically were people of various organized religions. The spiritualists were not that. Right? These people are the ones associated with things like the Fox sisters, which were, the rapping sounds, things like that. The idea that they can communicate through seance, through trance, essentially, and be transformed, possessed, whatever you want to call it, and then they would speak through, their bodies. Right? Now, when we're talking Civil War, post-Civil War, it hadn't gotten wacky yet, right? And I want to make that clear. It hadn't gotten, when people think of spiritualists, they think like ectoplasm and all this other stuff, right? That hadn't happened yet. That wasn't even a thing yet. So, you have the Fox sisters, you had a few different people, you had curious people wanting to know what's happening, what is this? They would go to these events, and what impressed them, right? This is what's interesting, what impressed a lot of these people and got them to believe this is happening, these transformations, these trances are real, was that, well, these Fox sisters were not from a prominent family. They weren't somebody that grew up with a significant amount of education. Right? Nobody thought anything of the such. And when they were in these trance states, they would start speaking about matters that, especially women at the time, would not generally have complicated opinions on, or be privy to the nuances of um, like various types of sciences, early forms of sociological knowledge about how to people should be governed and how things people function, early forms of um, you know um, I guess like proto psychology kind of stuff, right? And all this kind of shit, and even religious, right? They would be able to quote and talk about like theology, to the same depth that say a priest could, right? Someone of the clergy. And so the Fox sisters, along with other women that were doing these trances, they were saying, talking about all this like stuff that wasn't just, oh, this is impressive, but also this is like, where did they get this from? So their assumption was they truly are being, you know, and and so then, according to a lot of these women that were doing this sort of stuff, they were saying that the information was coming from the spirit world, right? And I guess in the spirit world, the idea was that if you die, you become this soul, this entity, and you can continue, um, essentially, learning and growing more knowledgeable, powerful, whatever you want to call it. And the other idea was that there was no hell, there was no heaven, that it was all a construct of the soul and its association with consciousness. Right? That was like their whole thing. It was the philosophy behind it, the religiosity in a way, in some respects. It was sort of a spiritual anarchism in many ways, because they didn't really believe in hierarchies, especially the old school guard. They didn't believe in these hierarchies of like regarding their belief system. That was nonsense to them. So what you would generally see something within Catholicism and various forms of Christianity and Judaism, and having things like priests and clergy and rabbis and so on. That was just absurd to this kind of group, these people. This is where it gets really fun, I think, for those of you that are like ghosts, souls, psh, right? Okay, fine. That's not even the most interesting part about all this. So, what I find interesting is that this was like one of the first times women had any kind of a podium, any kind of a voice, right? Because essentially, if we're talking Civil War and even post-Civil War, and early even 1910s, 1914, you're still talking about a sort of what some people refer to as like a domestic slavery, right? And this was like one of the first times that like people actually listened. Men were listening intently. The social excuse, at least for that time, and that got changed, was that, oh well, these are that women are like they're able to be mediums because of how like nurturing and innocent and so on that they are, right? They're a naivete or whatever. That's what allowed male spirits of great intellect and whatever to channel themselves through the woman. Right? That was initially the belief. Well, a lot of the people didn't believe that, but that was like the sort of theory that a lot of the more, I mean, for lack of a better phrase, like man's world-centered thinking, that let them go, oh, we're not really listening to this woman talk about philosophy and politics and science and theology. We're listening to the spirit of a man using the woman. And then there were the people that just thought, no, there's just these spirits, like there is no man or woman when you're a spirit. It's just you are, right? So on and so forth. In any case, a lot of the stuff that these women were talking about when they were in these trance states were generally really cool things that things we think are cool today. At least, I guess if you're, in my opinion, if you're a reasonable person, which is things like women's suffrage. So things like suffrage, things like freedom of religion of any kind, non-denominational spiritual beliefs, things like abolition. Yeah, the spirits from the spirit realm. We're talking about how we need to get abolition needs to happen now, right? So the spirits were anti-slavery. The spirits were, uh, you know, various types of sort of like hierarchical things that nowadays we go like, yeah, we got to think about the spirits who are coming through and saying this, right? The idea, the belief, was that because those types of things were not problems anymore in the spirit world, that the only way to improve the spirit world was to improve the real or the material world, right? So the idea was to learn lessons from the spirit world so that we can improve our station in life here, improve society here and now. And it's just very fascinating that a lot of the stuff that was coming through these trances were essentially of various forms of social reform that would have been thought to have been like absurd or radical or crazy, right? But it was actually getting people to go, well, the spirits are saying this shit. Like, who are we mortals to question these, humans stuck on the material plane? Who are we to question these ideas? Like, whoa. Right? And so it was really interesting because you had some pretty, like, for the time period, you had some pretty radical shit being talked about openly through these, like, trances or so on and so forth, right? And that's when things started getting real bad, though, because once we go post-Civil War, and once some people might call it like this, I don't know, debate, whatever, but the 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 clause of the mercantile world, for some capitalism or what have you, grabbed a hold of spiritualism, right? And with that, you started people focusing not on the spiritual aspects of it, but you had a lot of male handlers of some of their women thinking, how can I make a buck? How can I make some money? Right. And so then you did have the groups that weren't doing just, oh, I'm doing a trance, and they're kind of proving that they're doing it through the knowledge they're invoking. But the people wanted to see more, right? It became a sensation. So, we want to see like images of the ghost. Oh, we want that's how you got ectoplasm. You got all these fake ass pictures of like women like spitting out like stuff, right? That ends up being like, I don't know. I think it was like, what do they call, cheese paper or some shit. And then so you had these like over the top things. And so what's crazy is some of the women that were initially doing some of this more trance stuff, more spiritual stuff, because of a lot of male handlers and stuff, they were like, okay, we got to step it up. We got to make it more, just add more show. I mean, we get it, it's real, but like we got to make them believe. So just let's add more things. And so it just got worse and worse and worse. Now, another interesting thing about this. Sorry, my throat's a little sore, is that besides the whole social reform thing, now think about this, okay? And I'm kind of leading up to why it is that I have this belief in the afterlife, but also, and that's just my thing, and also it has to do with my personality and how I react to things like the underdog and such. But what was happening is, this was getting real popular, right? People started essentially converting to this, leaving their Christian churches, or trying to combine Christian belief with like this kind of spiritualist stuff. And then the scientific community started going, oh wait, like, okay, this is something interesting to look at. Let's go test this. Let's go talk to these people. Let's see if we can corroborate information. Like, what do we know about this person? They would like investigate the medium, right? And who she was, and have conversations with her, so on, learn about her past, and so on and so forth. And then they would be like, okay, like, let's do this thing. And then, like, they might ask the medium questions about stuff they would assume she wouldn't be privy to. And then, lo and behold, she was somehow able to have answers, right? They didn't have the internet, so she couldn't just look it up on her phone or anything, right? Um, some argue that maybe they had like people in their lives that were like teaching them a bunch of stuff, and they they did it like that. But who knows? Point is, it was mostly just that stuff, and like I said, it got worse and worse. But the other point is that the scientific community of the late 1800s, especially the early 1900s, we're talking like World War One stuff. Yeah, they did not like this shit because they were like, no, 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 no. This is not science. This is not materialism. There is no human soul. We are only biological entities. That is all. Now, this got like a lot of scientists in a tizzy. This got other scientists to go against other scientists because they're like, well, okay, maybe we should test this, and maybe we should look at this, and maybe we should really pay attention to it, and that's how a lot of the what would be considered parapsychology and things like that started kind of slowly, um, appearing, and so you had this kind of inside battle, right? But then you also had the church, Catholic and otherwise, various synagogues and what have you. They were like, what the fuck are you talking about? There's no like order to this. Like there's no what is this, like spiritual anarchism, right? No, there's this monotheism, and this is what happens, and this is how it works. These are the rules, and they're like, no, and that was causing various types of religious communities and leaders a lot of worry. Now, what I found the most fascinating is that this is one of the few times where the scientific community and essentially the organized church religion community were doing that thing where it's like the enemy of my enemy, or so what is it? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yeah, and so they were double teaming scientists, both scientists and religious people on a social level, essentially what today we call canceling. They were canceling people socially if they were involved with this stuff. So if you were somebody with a PhD, you were a scientist, whatever, you were interested, oh, nobody's gonna publish you, nobody's gonna read your fucking books, you fucking crazy person that thinks ghosts are real. We're not gonna give it the time of day. And then of course, if you had people in the community, or you even had priests, parishioners that were like interested in this, and they're like, no, look, it doesn't contradict the teachings and all this sort, those people would get excommunicated. It's like, get the fuck out of here, you're crazy, that's not in the book that we have, so it's not real, it doesn't work. And then people, that were talking about this within the church, it's like, oh, Sarah or Samuel were talking about the spiritualist stuff. And of course, priests are like, no, those are demons, or those are, this is how the devil tricks you with like all these deceptions and whatever, what have you. And so people were getting canceled for being spiritualists like crazy, like all over the place. Even the media was having fun with it, right? It was like they were sensationalizing it, right? And then when because of what I said, and they started doing like the more over the top stuff that was obviously fake, when they would get caught, everyone would jump on the bandwagon and be like, this is why it's all fake, this happened, and they caught this person making shit up, so it's all fake, right? And you had guys like Houdini, especially, it was like a big one that hated this shit. You had H.P. Lovecraft, who was buddies with Houdini, hated this shit. They wrote letters to each other about how much spiritualism sucked. And but what's amusing is that none of them had any real understanding of the history of it. There wasn't much, discussed. It was just kind of more like there wasn't like a lot of books published on the history of spiritualism at that point. And so they only jumped on the train when it comes to spiritualism, really looking at it, once it got to the more like, you had more charlatans, and basically once, for lack of a better word, capitalism got involved and turning into like a market, like an industry, right? And you even had like famous guys like Winston Churchill, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. They were into this stuff during Civil War. Todd Lincoln, whatever, Lincoln's wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, she was into this shit. And so even Abraham Lincoln was hearing about this shit, right? But anyway, yeah, it was making it to the White House essentially. Like they knew about it, right? And so that was another problem. Now you had the state against this stuff too. It wasn't just the scientific community and the church. The state was like, wait, like during the Civil War and this stuff. What the fuck abolitionist shit coming out of these crazy kooks? Or what the fuck? They're talking about social reform. They're talking about like what? There should be like a social net for people, like for the people of the country, and blah blah blah. Like, you know, that, so they all said, oh, that's just crazy spiritualist talk, right? So everyone hated these fucking guys. Everyone hated them. Like all the big mainstream groups, institutions, everyone fucking hated these guys. And they were doing anything to anybody. They were just doing their own thing, and then human beings were like, this is good stuff. What? And then, but I guess that made them the bad mans. So, the consequences of the Materialist revolution, which kind of, I call that when essentially spiritualism got fucking stamped out. It's also the organized religious revolution plus the Materialist revolution. It kind of eventually culminated into like what some of you probably in your 30s saw, like the whole internet atheism versus theism battles, and you know, you got all the anti-theism stuff coming up in modern times and throughout, and you know, a lot of this kind of division between the scientific community and like the spiritual community or some religious, like it just got worse and worse. Like it turned into a team sport more and more, and this was, I feel like, the only opportunity that human beings had to be able to combine, you know, abstract concepts, ideas, spiritual ideas, the cults, whatever you fucking want to call it, and, you know, hard science, and then being like, okay, well, let's study the psychology of this. Is there a benefit? Blah blah blah. Even if, you know, this and this and that, is there a societal good coming out of this? So on and so forth. Everyone's leaving. They're like, it's boring. Anxious doing a history lesson. Anyway, so the consequences was the association of things like various forms of social reform to the crazies, right? To the spiritualists. And so, you know, even if people were trying to bring up, because these associations occurred, it like stifled any kind of social progress to a significant degree. So I find it fascinating. That is what's been in my head. I've thought about this many times in the past. I wrote like a 20-page paper in college about it. Read a few books on the matter. So on. And I just think it's interesting. And also, it reminds me of sort of like, I would imagine there was probably a significant amount of like neurodivergent people involved in this shit. Especially like probably like the schizos like me that are just like going full meta and just being like why do we need this and why do we need that and why does this function like this and blah blah blah, and it's like, and things like tradition made no fucking sense in a variety of ways. And you know, yeah, I thought it was a very interesting topic to bring up, and to maybe educate people on it if they didn't know anything about it that watch my stuff. It is actually the only religious, now it's considered a religion, so the more anarchist perspective of it. Yeah, they were a threat to the monopoly rationalist narrative that maintain the status quo institutions. Yeah, and their proprietors, hegemony. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very simple stuff. That's why I became so obsessed with it, is when I, discovered that it wasn't just like a bunch of, like initially when I was younger, I thought like, oh, this is cool, seances and ghosts and ectoplasm. I was just into it for that reason. And then when you start reading the writing of these women and men that were interested in this, like, you're like, yo, these guys spitting fire. Like, what the fuck? These guys spitting crazy fire for, like, 1893. It's like, what is happening? And so, yeah. So, yeah, I just wanted to share that shit with you guys. So, if anybody has any ideas on it or thinks it's boring or stupid, you're more than welcome to tell me. But let me see who's on here with me. I think old Shadow's here. Let me see. Oh yeah. Let's see here. Hello, Shadow.
Hi,
All right. Did you hear my ramble?
I did, but I have nothing to offer.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
I have no uh, prior knowledge, and I just didn't find anything that I could latch onto.
There was nothing interesting in that at all. Oh,
I didn't say it wasn't interesting. I just said like, it's information, but like there wasn't enough of like an in depth for one thing for like to go further. It was like not necessarily it was a lot of service level information, but
well,
like
yeah.
kind of
That's
foundational.
all
You
I
know what
can
I
do.
mean?
That's all I can do right now. I didn't prepare a whole like presentation, have notes I can read and
Yeah,
for
it just
specific
is right.
years and
So
things. Yeah. I mean, but my point is that this is a interesting fucking thing that people out there that are not about organized religion, but also they're looking for something like I don't know of that sort of type of nature. This is a cool one. This is a cool one. It's
I mean,
anarchist spiritualism or whatever you want to call it.
I mean, there's when we get into like kind of young stuff, because you mentioned him in part of it, it was there's like a lot of ideas and concepts that are kind of shared across cultures, even ones that haven't interacted with each other.
Yeah. Collective
So
unconscious,
there's
all that.
yeah, but it doesn't need to be something as spiritual as a collective unconscious for those that are more
Yeah,
reserved and
for the
like getting into the
rationalists,
subject,
right?
right? It could just be inherent, like this is the way the human brain works, and chances are the human brain will come to this conclusion more often than not.
I mean, there's people that argue the idea of genetic memory. So there's also those ideas, right? Some people think that that could actually traverse through time in some capacity, but I don't know.
What is really creepy though are the types of dreams, like when you get into like dream theory, because I've had many dreams during my lifetime, right? So there's a lot of
Yes.
imagery that is reflective of the media I've consumed. So there's a lot of unconscious themes and concepts that I've uh, not inherited, integrated into my unconsciousness that I'm not aware of, but like the other side of me is aware of, and it's reflected in the dreams I have. So it's like it's interesting to realize that there are stories that I've consumed that some part of me understands, but I don't have access to that part of me unless I'm in that dream state.
Yeah. It's been referred to as a lot of things. That thing you're describing, and the Akashic records, for one
Yeah,
instance.
so it doesn't necessarily, I'm being more logically founded on this because I need, some kind of like uh what's the opposite of abstract?
Concrete.
Concrete.
Yeah.
Like I need some concrete thing to latch onto, right?
Hmm. Well, that's kind of what I was like, sort of doing with the social stuff, because it was kind of like it was this kind of idea that like it took like look how much it took just to get somebody to listen about some of those things. It took that much fucking effort and that much convoluted mess to get people to actually listen or metacognate, right? That's what's interesting, right? It was an opening of metacognition that was occurring through these sort of events, through these trances, right? That were coming through. Right? It was
How
opening the
much of
mind.
that do you believe like because there's this kind of weird concept that floats around whenever the topic of trauma gets brought up.
Yeah.
And it's like, because trauma makes the brain develop in different ways than the average brain would normally develop, it's almost like it speeds up certain areas at the expense of regressing others, kind of like a just a focus.
Hmm.
So when you have these types of people that would normally be deemed outcasts, they go undergo through a type of difficulty in their life that represses some aspects of normalcy, but allows them to engage with other aspects that wouldn't normally be accessed by the average population. So,
Yeah.
do you think it's like from an evolutionary perspective? Do you think this is a matter of the literal biology of our brain adapting and just evolving over time?
You mean, well, I mean, part of those adaptations have to do with our brain's ability to essentially hyper abstract and hyper concretize information. Those capacities exist because they had their use, they had their purpose at different times. Right? Otherwise, the human brain wouldn't be so fucking capable of such feats. Because otherwise, a lot of that would have been discarded, but it never was because, well, it kept propagating more and more people that had these kind of outliers in the mix, right? So, as far as trauma goes, yeah, that's all like nearest plasticity shit, right? That's like all.
Yeah. So, like from kind of what I was getting at was it's it's not so much I'm asking a question, more so I'm just kind of playing around with the idea of how interesting the concept is that you could look at human history in you might be able to eventually notice literally the changing of biology and the ways that the brain could think in the future that it can't do now, or that we can now that we couldn't do
Mm,
however many years ago in the past. You know what
I
I mean?
I don't know. I think most of
Because
it.
like the concept of seances or accessing collective unconsciousness, I wonder if our ability to do that in the future could be improved upon through literal evolution.
I mean, there's people that are of the opinion that this has nothing to do with like ghosts or souls. There's people that argue that it has to do with like I guess what would be considered like psychic phenomena. Basically, like all these trances are people assuming they're speaking to spirits, but they're actually just talking to some kind of like record of human thought, some kind of network, that kind of shit. Um, but as far as like people getting better at it, I don't know because the human brain, I mean, it changes from individual to individual, but the capacity for what it can and cannot do is it's not going to naturally like fucking evolve at some kind of exponential rate unless we start putting like fucking if you want to call evolution, making actual
What do you mean it wouldn't
modifications.
evolve at an exponential rate?
Well, it's not evolving just because it can think about more things and think about more complicated subjects. It's not. That's
Isn't
not.
that how literal neuroplasticity
Yeah, but
works? The
that's
more
not.
things you understand, the easier it is
It
to
means that the
understand.
brain was always capable of doing this. It's
Well,
just that now
it,
the
it was
conditions
always
are in
capable of
place
doing it.
to allow it to. That's literally all it means. It's not like
Hmm.
something new is coming, like new, the genetics of what a human is are like changing so rapidly that the next human brain is going to be like just a little bit more powerful than the next one after that, and some like it wouldn't it would I mean it could if our
Are you
species
sure?
or if our species is around for like sure another few hundreds of
Would
thousands of
would
years.
but wouldn't our technology? Do you think our technology wouldn't be able to speed up that process by at least a
Yeah, well, yeah,
significant
no,
margin?
no. Well, if you're talking about like inserting shit into our brains to do that, then yes.
Not necessarily like
Okay,
augmentation.
okay. If we're not
Like
talking
for example,
augmentation, no, no.
the biggest invention we have right now is the internet, right? The ability to access so much information
Hmm. Yeah,
and
but your
converse
brain
with.
can only tap into so much of it.
But the fact that we can do it now means it's going to adapt to the newfound technology
Sure, but
in a way
after
that we
like
wouldn't have
if
been
the
able to do
internet or
before.
things like the internet or the neosphere or noobsphere as they call it in Warhammer, if that kind of shit exists, sure. If we start attaching our spinal cords and shit to it, yeah, I guess if we do that for a few thousand years, you're gonna have some changes to what the human brain is like as it like
I'm just
literally
playing around.
like
I'm not.
literally
I
from
don't.
birth, like for an average
I,
human.
I'm not talking about any kind of technological augmentation. I'm just
I don't
merely
understand what you're
toying with
saying
the
then.
idea.
Like you just
I'm
said like new
merely
thoughts and
interested
new.
in the idea of pushing the limits of biology.
Yeah, I mean we can do that. It's just like what I think is happening is if you're talking about like cuz like people are not smarter now than they were in the the 1500s, the 1600s. They're not. They're just they just have the information available now. And they can process it, something the human brain could always do. And they can take it apart. They can work as a group to use multiple brains to come up with new ideas and then share that information. And so now you can run those processes in your brain. It's not a smarter brain. It's the same fucking brain. That's why you had people that were like motherfucking geniuses like Leonardo da Vinci that could do like calculations in his fucking head or on paper that even a mathematician now needs a fucking device to do. Obviously, they can do far more complicated things, but they need to rely on the device or they just happen to be a genius of some kind. But my point being is that it's the same fucking brain. Your brain is the same brain that was there 1,000 years ago.
But it's not. There's an issue with that because trying to compare someone like Leonardo da Vinci to, let's say, someone with below average IQ,
Okay, an aristocrat. Well,
there
yeah,
are biological
yeah,
differences.
but the problem is that before, if your IQ was like 115, 120, or whatever you want to call it, and you were poor, you wouldn't get any education. You wouldn't even use whatever peak brain activity. Like there would be no. What are you gonna do with it? You're gonna be a really good farmhand. Oh, this is the best farmhand ever. He's so smart. Okay, like you know what I mean. You didn't have access to literature. Like if you're never taught to read, it doesn't matter what your IQ is. You just never taught to read.
I only said that in response to you
Yeah.
saying that we all have the same brain. It's still the same functionally human brain. And that's true and not true at the same time.
Well, I mean,
That's the
it can
only thing I was trying
change
to
and
address.
grow and do all kinds of shit. Yeah, yeah. But I agree with
Well,
that.
because you
But
can't, again, you can't compare someone like Leonardo da Vinci to someone with below average IQ. There are biological
yeah,
differences that
yeah.
separate the two.
But
That's
I'm
not
just
the
talking.
same brain.
Well, I mean, it's the same. Fine, fine. In that sense, okay, fine. There are variations of the same schematic that happens, right? But as far as like those variations of like different kinds of brains, some that are like a lot more efficient and better at this or that, or higher IQ than this or that, or just gifted, quote unquote. I don't think that variation has like increased or decreased. I think it's pretty much the same.
Why are you so against the idea of that?
I'm not against it. I
Because
just don't believe
it
it.
seems like not common sense, but it seems obvious that the variation would
Why
increase
would it
due
increase?
to more access for the brain to, like, the more tools the brain has to learn.
I mean, no. I mean, if you want to make an argument for why it would increase, I would say it's because of less like better resources, better diets, basically better sperm, better eggs, staying healthy, people being able to be like not malnutritioned, so they're producing better cells to spit out of their bodies and make babies. So you get you know like maybe stuff like that. Sure, I can buy that, but technology is not producing the more smart babies unless you want to talk like genetic engineering eventually. But it's not producing more smart babies just because there's more knowledge. No, that's not happening. I don't believe
What's
that.
going to be really interesting is seeing the generations that are younger than me
Hmm.
and how they develop long after, or not long after, but how they just eventually grow up and develop. Because I didn't have, like, I was kind of in the middle, my generation was, where we had technology like halfway through our childhood.
Yeah.
But there are other children that grow up with these technological advances that, in my opinion, are not to be underestimated in any capacity. The effects of the internet on the human psyche is
Oh yeah, they're significant.
so it
The
in ways I
psych
can't
show.
even words fail to describe it,
All
right?
right, Don just said
So
if
I'm just
yeah, go ahead.
more interested in understanding how that would change the development
Well,
of
that's a
a
different
human
question.
brain.
That's a different question. And if you're talking about changes in birth rates of varying like IQs, then I don't think the internet's doing anything good or bad regarding that. I think, like for example,
But do you think it's doing something?
oh
Because
yeah,
that's
well
was just what
it's
I
doing
was
something
interested
to the
in.
individual people with the individual brains that now encounter it and now have access to knowledge and choices that they can make and not be held back by when before all you had was books and before that you had very low literacy in general. If you're talking pre-printing press or something, even that
I'd have to know more about biology to see how much,
I,
if any, of the like psychological capacity of the brain is passed on
well, I haven't.
genetic wise.
There's theories, there's ideas regarding some of that stuff. Trauma can, according to some studies, basically like somehow carry over genetically, but that's still like a lot of that stuff I don't know much about. I know last I checked, it was pretty up in the air. There's still a lot more work to do. Don said, if anything, the internet is leading to overall devolution. If you look at statistical correlation, knowledge is not intelligence, and intelligence doesn't guarantee generational legacy. Yeah, that's part of the. But this is what's interesting, Don. Um, as a society, as a civilization, in many ways, we can, because we can offload stuff onto the cloud now, like computers and stuff like not just the cloud, but you know what I mean. The internet now we can offload more information and store more information and have access to that information faster so you can find solutions to problems a lot quicker than you used to. Like like you don't have to figure out how you're going to heat your food anymore because there's already like all this stuff to heat your food. You don't have to figure out how to keep your food. You don't have to like dedicate all this time and knowledge and intellect to figuring out how to do a lot of things that you used to have to. And that includes a variety of things like information accessibility because of the internet. So yeah, like and so it might look like somebody like the 100 IQ person of now is somehow smarter than the 100 IQ person of 500 years ago. um
I'm just saying it's gonna be real interesting when I see a digitized soul.
well, we'll see about that, the singularity shit. So
Like the stuff you're talking about, I only relate to in that it's the things you were saying earlier about seances and the like unconscious collective. I understand that, but only from a digitalized version of that, because
mhm.
that's kind of where my brain's always been, even when I was a child.
Sounds like you need
The
to
consequences of
sounds
watching
like
Tron.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Sounds like
I
you're, that's just, I don't know, that's what works for you. That's fine. The ghost in the shell action or whatever. um but oh yeah, here's something I wanted to mention regarding oh the singularity stuff. And then no, oh yeah, this was something I was talking to uh Era about too, which was the because they're vegetarian, well they're vegan, right? And we had a conversation about how, like, obviously, right, human beings couldn't always make that choice. A human being couldn't make the choice to be vegan, like,
Yeah.
during very long lengths of time. And it wasn't because, like, they just didn't have the knowledge to be able to make that choice, right? Even if, like, they lived in a society, even if they were like some kind of aristocrat or something, and they had the money to become essentially vegan or vegetarian, like the philosophical meanderings and books written on those such matters, the knowledge about like what the human body needs to function, everything else, like all that kind of shit was unavailable knowledge, right? And it was only through the process of continuing to consume animals that we eventually figured out, hey, we don't have to eat animals, right? And then eventually we figured out, hey, we don't have to eat animal products, right? And there's a lot of barriers to entry. There's social stuff, economic stuff, whatever. There's like, well, I'm not vegan or anything like that. But point is, eventually, right? Like another good example is using animals or mice or whatever for like scientific experimentation, right? So eventually, right, they might figure out because of these. It's kind of fucked, but like the experiments they've done on mice, eventually they'll figure out how to not to even need mice anymore to do this, and then eventually it'll be that we don't, we don't need because we don't need meat because we fucking did all these experiments on animals or something that eventually made it so we no longer have to do them in order to make any kind of progress of some kind or another. And then eventually, if we digitize ourselves, kind of like what you said, we don't have to eat it all. And if we don't have to eat it all, we don't have to kill anything to eat, not even plants. So it's just
And what's going to be even more interesting to me is seeing how nature would adapt to that digital age.
well, I mean, because that's a problem, right? Like you can't. You would have to have like it would. It gets really science fictiony, but say like all human consciousness was just uploaded to like the stuff, and then like we were in some like digital world where we can like interact and still build societies inside of it that look and feel like the ones we were doing before, but now we're literally not in the physical world, and so thus we never have to eat or drink, but we can simulate it as we wish. And then eventually, but you would still have to have something in the meat world, right? So then you would have to have like
What if
robots and
what if
machines
the
that we can manipulate from the digital world in order to upkeep the machines and the computers and everything else to keep this thing running and going. Now, the scary
what
thing
if we
about
don't do that? What if we genuinely created an entire universe that could be isolated from the physical plane and still run?
well, I mean, that's really unrealistic, but sure. I mean, it would have to be some kind of perpetual machine that somehow never gets hit by any kind of asteroid. The nothing.
No, I'm saying even if the physical connection that create that universe could be
Oh,
destroyed
oh, you mean
and
like
it could still run.
some kind of like, I don't know. You start getting into like weird realms that I have no.
You know,
I can't
I
talk about. I don't know a lot about this. The
I know
quantum
I'm
realm
just
and all
it's
this
a
sort
lot
of
of just
shit.
conjecture, right? But
Well, yeah, it's cool
it's
science fiction, but like,
there's so many people that like I don't want to underestimate or invalidate like the pain of existence for anybody, but for me, I don't think I could ever bring myself to ever choose death if I really did have that choice, because I'm just so fascinated and intrigued by what the future could bring
mm,
in all of its
yeah, I get that.
mysteries, that I'd want to see how more, like, I want to see more stories. I want to see
Right.
how they
Well,
unfold.
according to the spiritualists, you're going to see all kinds of stories. So, but
It's just so fascinating, the conjecture of
yeah,
future.
that's what's interesting. So, yeah. But what I think part of what I was thinking about too is that like with spiritualism, right? Because it was all the trappings of religion were no longer there, right? But it was through spiritualism that a lot of modern social progress ideas were being pushed as early as the late 1800s and before that, obviously. But point is, it was coming through. It was like affecting society, and it was through the spiritual of all things, right? And it was through the secular and spiritual, and that was affecting the sciences, that was affecting the social sciences, that was affecting human psychology, that was affecting how a society should be governed, right, with this idea that we're all equal in death, and we all just like any hell that you inhabit after death is created in your mind, and or any heaven or what have you, and it's all just consciousness. And if you're isolated from others during life completely, then you shall also be isolated in death, but you still have the chance to reestablish those connections that you couldn't in life. That was their beliefs, right? They thought like evil people could still have redemption arcs, but they're going to go through hell before they can get an opportunity to have an opportunity to undergo those redemption arcs. And if
What's
they
that
choose,
one movie with that really cool quote? It was like evil is an abstract.
uh,
There
no,
was there was one movie that talked about how hell itself was just the absence of God before humans needed it to be a place of flagellation, and that's why it became what it was today. It was a really interesting concept.
I don't know. I'm not sure. It sounds familiar, but I couldn't. Let's see here. Don says
But yeah, it's kind of what you were talking
we
about.
only see as far as we do because we stand on the shoulders of giants. Take away the giant, society crashes, and there isn't the intellectual capacity and collaboration to recreate it from zero. Yeah, that's why you need other people, right? Because essentially, when humans work together, they're just combining the powers of all their brains, and all the variations of their brains can produce
Yeah,
at
and then they
different
all mold into
efficiency.
one person, one entity, hive mind.
No, only philosophically, but not really, unless they turn into like a weird thing or something. Like it's this kind of idea of retaining the individual while also understanding the need for others, and the responsibility of the individual as well in that matter. But
Until the day the sun gets a little bit too red.
well, but then according to you, like there's that science fiction idea of like, oh, what if we travel to a different dimension where where the sun is still new and good, and we just keep doing that. And like, and if there's just like an infinitude of dimensions, and we just keep switching between them, and eventually we become like some fucking, I don't know, some shit, some wacky shit. Why do we continue to cut humans in half? Bodies with souls, and souls with bodies, ghosts and corpses, worshiping idols of death. We are an inseparable part of nature. Yeah, yeah. I think even metaphysical beliefs are inseparable part of nature. Yeah, that's what I think. I think I think that the I don't know. There's more than meets the eye, but that's just my belief system. That's me. That's just me being a weirdo. But oh yeah, and then that was another funny point is that because prior to learning about spiritualism and its history and stuff a while back, I wasn't interested at all in any kind. Like I was just like, "You're dead, you die," and I had no beliefs like that. And I was really anti-theist and all this sort of shit. And and it wasn't till I came across this that I started thinking about it more. And it's just an intuitive thing. But the reason I was like, maybe there's something to this is because everyone was against it, and I have a bias for the underdog. And I have a bias for like when institutions and tyranny and like overarching things all work together to destroy something that is like not destructive or harmful. Only they're perceiving it as such because it's like shaking up their foundations and they don't like it and they're scared. Then I'm like, there's truth in that. There's some truth in there. There's got to be, because truth's scary. The unknown is scary. There's got to be some truth in there. And when you look at the history of it, and it's being tied to like all kinds of stuff that already was associated with like being kind of crushed under the weight of like the ideas of the time and the incredibly slow progress. Like it's just wild that that means that you had people in in 1882 or something. You had people that were like just as open and just as like, why are we doing this, as somebody today, maybe more so. That's crazy. Like that's really interesting. And God knows how long they've existed. So, but it's been just constantly. That's why I always say metacognition has been something that has been the most destroyed, oppressed, stifled, suppressed thing that a human is capable of doing. That shit has been like squeezed out of every human being possible through a variety of means.
What if it needs to be because trauma is the only thing that develops it?
No, that's absurd.
It
That's absurd. Trauma is what works now because that's all because we don't teach it. We don't we don't have public schools discussing it. We don't have like, things like spiritualists talking about this kind of shit like on a mainstream level, right? We have a bunch of fucking organized religions and dogmatic science. So it sucks. And in social hierarchy based academics, it's like, oh, great. That's going to be great. So it's all like low metacognitive like shit that's like fueling all these things that like change and shape society. Like, oh, great. Relevant. That story about organ transplant inducing personality changes. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I've seen that one. Damn, I'm late and I'm missing the context. Well, go back and watch it. You might like this one, Active. I went into a whole history of like cursory history of spiritualism and it turned into like fucking singularity shit and all kinds of dumb shit. But
doesn't, man. I watched Tron and it had a lot of
yeah,
effect on me.
and I watched Ghostbusters. I guess I don't know. No, I watched like The Exorcist. I watched what was like I mean, yeah, movies like a lot of religious horror movies I grew up with, and stuff like that, and a lot of movies. You know what movie had a big impact on me? Like The Wicker Man. I just watched it last night. I showed it to Faxon on the server. But yeah, The Wicker Man. Oof, that movie's fucking 1970s fucking amazing film. Not just because of like the awesome music and the awesome costumes and the great acting, but because of like the themes and the ideas of like what happens if there's an island full of people that have like this pagan religion, right? And they're like isolated, but they're still part of a modern monotheistic organized religion type of country. And they're isolated, but they're still paying their taxes, so they're kind of left alone to their own devices. And then you send a person of authority, some kind of cop, to investigate a crime that's been reported in this place. And he gets there, and this place is like, what the fuck? This isn't Britain. What the fuck is this shit? Like this is not normal. This isn't Christian. There's people running around fucking naked. There's people like in the middle of a field fucking. There's girls jumping over like fucking fires, ringing like singing like all this pagan shit. You got people doing maypoles. You got teachers telling the kids, "Hello, kids. Do you know what the maypole represents?" And all the kids are like, "A phallic symbol." And then she's like, "Yes, it represents the man's penis." And they're just having a discussion on like reproductive stuff through their like spiritual pagan beliefs and stuff, and everyone's like, you know it's just it's a great fucking movie. Awesome movie with a lot of weird shit in it, but cool concept, cool idea of what happens. Well, I'm not going to give it away for somebody that wants to watch it. There's no, not that Wicker Man. Caveat or disclaimer: do not watch 1970s Wicker Man with Christopher Lee. Watch that Wicker Man. Do not watch. Well, you could watch Nicolas Cage Wicker Man after you watch that one because that movie's hilarious and incredibly bad. And I was thinking if Faxon's on, I might watch it tonight. It's a horrible adaptation with Nicolas Cage, and it is just the most laughable piece of shit ever. But anyway, metaphysical belief is valid, but when separated from the natural world is a distinct belief and denies supernatural. What could be more natural than natural? Yeah, exactly. I run with you, Don, on that one. Yeah. I think if there is anything to this credence to this stuff, it is just part of nature. It's just a type of nature that I just don't think we've gotten. Not the beast, not the beast. Yeah, it's really. He's like punching little kids and shit. It's a fucking silly fucking movie. Tragic, tragic fucking movie, but it is funny. I'll give it that. But watch the original. It's so much better. So much god tier better. All right. According to Jay Parker, a handful of alleged SRA survivors claim there are many towns run by cults. Yeah, there's like weird little towns and little areas. Yeah, yeah, in different nations. Yep. I like my broken bones on the side of honey. That's funny. But yeah, like yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I mean, I don't know. That's all I have to say about the subject. I think I'm hungry. I haven't had anything in hours. I'm getting a headache. Um, if remember Tuesdays is when I talk about whatever the fuck I want to talk about. It's been bouncing around my stupid head, and I'll see you guys on Saturday. Remember, if you want to submit something for the question, I'll put the question out tomorrow. Um, submit it there. I read it anonymously. I interact with it. Whatever. If anybody else is on here, like Shadow is today, they're welcome to chime in. And then on Thursdays, usually I just play video games. I do this thing where I put 3 games up that are like indie, weird free games, and then I let whoever's watching pick one, and then I play it. And if that usually fills in the time, the hour and a half or so that I'll be on. If not, I'll play 2 of them. But I just fuck around because I like to go through the trash like a little raccoon, looking for weird trash media, and trying to find gems. A delicious rotten banana. All right, well, that's it. When day is dark, always remember happy day, and remember to join my Patreon. All right.